thing is that this session will be recorded, so those people who miss it will be able to actually listen to the recording. Prof, thank you very much for inviting me again, or rather for accepting the offer to chat to your guys. I have received a number of queries on the labor relations front from your members in Study Group 1, and I thought it might be an opportune time, not to take a long time to have the discussion, but certainly to have some discussion with you as a group to clarify some of the rules and, importantly, some of the opportunities around using labor relations practice in the time of COVID. I don't know if you want to say anything as an introduction, Prof, or you want me just to kick off?
Yes, thank you, Iver. We just want to say thank you for your time and willingness to present this webinar again. We really appreciate all your help so far. Thank you.
No,
and then
thank
I
you.
just want to ask, Ash says the meeting ID, or when he goes to go-to meeting, it's asking for a password.
Shouldn't be asking for any kind of password. Prof, let me send you the link again that you can just on-send to him. It shouldn't be asking for any kind of...
Looking forward to your presentation. Thank you so much, Iver.
Okay, no problem. I'm just going to very quickly send you the password again just to send to him. Or to send out to your members, because maybe there are others who are experiencing the same kind of problem, and then we can start. Let's just do this quickly. Thank you. No problem. There you go. I've just sent it to you again. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and thank you for joining me. I hope that you're starting to understand the process of UIF TERS, and also the process of the other UIF instruments, particularly the instrument around short time for those of you who've put your employees, and that's all employees, on short time. The one principle that doesn't seem to be well understood out there is the principle that if you are paying UIF on behalf of any staff member, including yourself, you are entitled to claim. You're entitled to claim TERS, you're entitled to claim short time or sick leave from UIF, and you should be applying for all three of those, even in the time of COVID, because certainly short time and sick leave qualify in the time of COVID, and then obviously TERS is built for COVID. I have come to the determination, and it's a global issue that's being understood, and that is that UIF TERS is going to become the South African equivalent of BIG, which is the basic income grant. And the basic income grant is something that over time is going to be our dole that is paid to people to stay at home, even if they've got a qualification, because they've been replaced by technology, or they've been retrenched, or because there just is no job for them. So those of you who think that TERS is going to come and is going to go, I think it's going to be here for life. I think it is going to tax the UIF, and importantly, I think it is also going to cause an additional amount of tax to have to be collected to be able to essentially pay people to be at home. But that doesn't really go for your practices unless you intend to scale down. And that's maybe where we start tonight's discussion. And that's in the process of saying that what I'd like to be discussing with you tonight is, number one, how does the level 3 with hotspots affect your dental practice? I want to talk about temporary employment relief and your blue collar staff. I want to talk about temporary employee relief and your professional staff. I might add there as well temporary employee relief and your foreign staff. Then I'll talk about labor relations consequences in the process of placing staff on short time and reduced hours. I want to talk about performance management that is required, not just in terms of COVID-19, but now after COVID-19. And I want to talk about the principle of dismissing staff now in the time of COVID-19. And then we'll go to questions and answers. But I think what I want to do in principle is I want to actually just switch on my screen so I can talk to you directly, and we can look at each other in the face as I do so. So I'm just going to do this, and I'm now going to, there we go. So I'm on screen. Excellent. Good. So this is me. Welcome, and thank you for joining me. So let's start by this. There seems to be a misunderstanding around employers that if you are open for business, the Labor Relations Act and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act apply. They apply. There is nothing that you have to be doing in your workplace which is out of the ordinary that you wouldn't have done before the time of COVID in terms of how you're dealing with either performance management of your staff, counseling of your staff, or dismissal of your staff. And when we talk about counseling and we talk about dismissal, we're talking about counseling or dismissing your staff in two specific contexts. Either the context of their behavior, in other words, either in the context of their performance, which is I appointed you in terms of your job description because you had the following qualities, the following competencies, and now you're not performing in terms of the competencies that I appointed you for, or alternatively, in terms of their behavior. I've got no doubt that you're an effective dental technician or a dental assistant. However, from a behavioral point of view, your behavior is less than acceptable, so I have to discipline you. So I'm going to be talking through that because there's an entire process to it, and there's absolutely no difference to applying that process now in the time of COVID or in fact in normal operating times in your businesses. And I cannot, ladies and gentlemen, emphasize that enough. A labor advisor or a trade union is certainly going to possibly try and convince you otherwise. Is going to say to you, well, you know, in the light of Ubuntu, you can't do this and you can't do that, and the labor law doesn't apply, and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act doesn't apply. That's absolute nonsense. Exactly as you would have been doing it 2 years ago, it applies now, and it'll apply 5 years later. There are no exceptions in terms of performance management, in terms of counseling, in terms of discipline, dismissal, or even retrenchment. And I'll talk about retrenchment because there seems to be this notion that during the time of COVID, you should not be allowed to retrench. Only if you were on a lockdown and your employees were temporarily laid off would there be a hiatus to retrenchment. In other words, a freezing of the Section 189 process so that during that lockdown period, you would not be allowed to retrench. However, the fact is, if you are back at work, you're entitled either to initiate a Section 189 process, which is looking at the efficiencies in your business, the productivity in your business, and either for operational reasons or for financial reasons, deciding that in fact you wanted to retrench your staff. And there's a process to that, and we'll talk about that process in a little while. So let's start at the very beginning. Please remember you can ask questions in the chat facility or you can unmute your microphone. We've got a nice smallish group tonight, so please feel free to ask your questions. You certainly won't embarrass yourself, I can guarantee you that. All right, so let's
I have one.
Yes, Sam,
Thanks.
of course, please.
So you mentioned that you can retrench and you'll go through that process. So here's an interesting one for you. We've, in a business that I'm involved with, have given notice to the landlord because our lease was up at the end of May and I didn't sign a new one. So we've given notice to close the office because everyone's working from home. It's an IT business. And the two staff members who we're not going to retrench now, but it's a question for you, that don't need to come in anymore is the receptionist and the cleaner. So we're carrying on employing them because maybe next year we'll go into a smaller office. But could you actually retrench someone when you don't have an office for them to come in to meet you in, is the question.
Are you locked? Is your business locked down?
It was until today.
Right. So you're entitled to say to them, please, we're calling you back to work as of Monday the 8th. When they come in on Monday, you're entitled to give them a notice of a Section 189 process. The Section 189 process says we want to engage with you on productivity in the office, on the fact that we are financially strapped or operationally we don't necessarily need you in these positions. We want to give you an opportunity to tell us what your view of our view is. In other words, do you think we can do things in a different way where we don't necessarily need to retrench you, but we're telling you that we're thinking about retrenching you, and you then are simply required to give them a period of time, which in this instance doesn't need to be more than 5 working days, to come back to you in writing with alternatives to retrenchment. So they might say, well, we're prepared to accept half of our salary, or we're prepared to job share, we're prepared to go on short time, whatever it is, or work shifts, and giving you in writing those solutions. And then from working day 6 to maybe working day 8, you make a decision, so that by working day 9 or 10, you're telling them, thanks for your suggestions, we've seriously taken them, this is why we cannot do this, that, and the other, and we're going to retrench you. So you can be in a position by maximum 2 weeks after bringing them back to work of retrenching them, of giving them a notice of retrenchment. You cannot do it immediately, though. Now, if you had started that process before COVID, before the 27th of March, the 27th of March would have frozen the process. But if you brought them back to work today or even tomorrow or Wednesday, it would unfreeze the process and you could continue where you left off in March. So my answer to you is you can definitely retrench if you wanted to. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, thanks. It was, so the question really was, if we don't have an office anymore, but I suppose we can always meet at a coffee shop, that we don't have a physical office to call them into.
Well, you can do it if you want to. I mean, so they're not working from home, are they?
No.
Okay.
It's really, I think let's not waste time on this, because it was just a tongue in cheek. We're not retrenching them.
Look, if you physically don't have an office, then you're entitled to meet them in the coffee shop and say, look, we don't have an office, so we are going to retrench you automatically for the following reasons. All right, good. So let's move on. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about the fact that we are now, as of today, in level 3, and we're in a hotspot of level 3, being in Johannesburg. Now, being in a hotspot of level 3 means we're still in level 3. Initially, we were led to believe that if we were a hotspot, we would remain in level 4 and maybe even go to level 5. But the government have decided against doing that. The government have said the whole country is a level 3. However, where there are hotspots, there are additional precautions. Additional precautions we don't know yet, because what's being published and what's being gazetted is just general for all level 3, except in hotspots, we've been told that specific teams would be deployed, but with no specific consequences for those hotspots. We anticipate that more rules for the hotspots will come down the line, but as things stand at the moment, you're in level 3, irrespective of whether you operate in a hotspot or not. However, what you can anticipate as a hotspot specific level 3 area is that what you should be doing is contacting your closest public or your closest health facility, hospital or clinic, which is licensed to deal with COVID related matters, so that there is a written agreement, even if it's just a fax, saying that if for whatever reason any of our patients or any of our staff test over 38 or 39 or whatever it is, or we suspect that they've contracted or they're showing signs of COVID, we will immediately remove them and transport them to your facility. Will you accept them in that facility? Very, very important that you have a written agreement in that regard. It's very important equally that you have a standard operating protocol in place for your workplace. Now, even if it's copying and pasting from an industry-wide standard operating protocol, I'm going to emphasize that if a policeman knocks on your door and you do not have posters in place, you do not have a standard operating protocol in place that you can physically hand that policeman, you do not have a testing facility in place, a heat scanning facility in place, and you do not have a physical space either in your place of work or in the center in which you work for purposes of short-term quarantining, when you pick up a problem with either a patient or with an employee that you can transfer that person to before transferring them to a facility, then in fact you can be shut down and you can be fined. And the fine at the moment ranges from between 10 and 25,000 Rand. There are Department of Labor personnel who are going around. There are also local government personnel who are going around, very, very eager to find those workplaces. At the moment, they say there's 48% of workplaces that have been fined for a variety of reasons. remembering that they won't fine you immediately. They might say to you, look, we're going to give you 1 day, we're going to come back tomorrow or the next day. And these are the things that have to be in place. So they normally take an enabling process. However, there are instances where in response to a policeman, one's natural instinct comes out to attack the policeman. And in that instance, they're entitled to issue spot fines. So all I'm saying to you is understand that there is an enabling process they ordinarily are instructed to follow with you. Don't give them cause to have to, overcome the enabling process or overreach the enabling process and simply give you a spot fine. And what I do want to say is what I've been saying to groups. If for whatever reason you are issued a spot fine, even if it's for driving in your car without a mask, please, please, please make sure that you immediately give notice that you will contest that spot fine. Because two things are happening at the moment. If you don't contest the spot fine and your court date comes and goes, then automatically you are issued with a criminal record. And it's the same criminal record that a rapist or a murderer or a robber would have received. Criminal record is a criminal record, irrespective of the reason you got it for. So I'm saying do not take it lightly. Do not think, okay, I'll just get my guy at the end of the year to offer to pay half. Doesn't work like that. These fines result immediately in criminal records unless they are contested. I cannot emphasize that enough, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a joke. Yes, there are 260,000 fines now that have been issued. Yes, government and COGTA are working on commuting the majority of those fines just to fines without criminal records. But the way things stand at the moment, you will automatically get a criminal record if you don't contest the fine you've got for whatever reason. If you do contest, even if you're guilty, it's unlikely that a magistrate or a judge in many instances would in fact impose a criminal fine and simply convert it to a fine, finished. Admission of guilt fine with no criminal record. And that's what you need. But please, this is a bit of a gap in the law that can give you a lot of nightmares over a 5-year period trying to reverse that criminal action against you. So please be very acutely aware of that. Yes.
I have a question, if I may.
Of course, yes, please.
When you say you need to immediately notify them of going to contest the fine or the transgression, do you do it to the person issuing the fine in
on the back of the fine? It gives you an address, an email number, or a phone number of the public prosecutor's office that you would then send a notice to say, I want to contest this fine. So literally, you just need to send through an email, but do it and keep a copy of it. If you feel that it's a significant enough case, so let's say you haven't got a standard operating protocol in place, you haven't got posters up, you haven't organized social distancing by marking off your floor or your countertops or even your surgery. So if none of that is in place, so you really know that you're to blame, then if you want, I can give you Manny Witz's number, and Manny's a guy to chat to because he will immediately put in a criminal defense for you. And it's not about the 10,000 Rand. I'm going to emphasize this again. The fine is bad enough, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 Rand. That's bad enough. But that's not what you're wanting to avoid here. What you're wanting to avoid is the criminal fine. The criminal fine stays on your record like a blot. You can't qualify for credit. It just completely messes up your life. So please be aware of that. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, it is perfectly feasible that in the next couple of weeks we receive hotspot regulations for Gauteng. I know for a fact they're not working on alert level variation. Anything can change over time. I mean, if we don't control our numbers, and we saw today the queues for alcohol, if we do not control our numbers and our numbers in Gauteng spike anything like the Western Cape, we will see our provincial government and our Premier Makuru deciding that instead of a level 3, we go back to level 4, maybe even level 5, because it's the only way they can handle the matter. It's very surprising that Alan Windey in the Western Cape has not produced regulations drawing the Western Cape down to a level 4 if not level 5, given their numbers. And with what we saw today on the beaches in the Western Cape, it will be surprising if we don't see activity in the next week or two in that regard. Very surprising. We know that we are likely to see numbers really picking up dramatically here in Gauteng, because we really are the hotbed of economic activity. 8 million people now are either back at work or expected to be back at work. Please bear in mind that at least 4 of those 8 million are in Gauteng. That's how big we are as a province. We're at least 50% of the employee base in the country. Remembering, please, 60-year-olds, people with cancer, people with diabetes, people with asthma, or any kind of predisposition should not be back at work. I don't know how you're letting those people back at work, because I know for a fact that none of your insurance companies have agreed to cover you should anything go wrong in the workplace for that period. And workman's compensation won't cover you. If the person is over 60, if they've been pre-diagnosed with cancer or diabetes or asthma. So you really are taking your life into your hands by allowing a person over the age of 60 or with any predisposition back into your workplace. And more importantly, you do not have indemnification cover for your workplace if your patient has not signed a waiver to indemnification and they're over the age of 60 or they have a predisposition. Sorry, was there a question there? No question. All right. Oh, Heath.
Heath, thanks. Ivor, first of all, thanks a lot for this amazing webinar.
Sure.
Secondly, I spoke to Jaco van der Sant at PPS at the beginning of this, and according to Jaco, we are fully covered in all eventualities, age-related, other related. He said there were no restrictions as far as he was concerned. That was then. I don't know if things have changed since then.
Certainly, if he's indicated to you that PPS will cover you as an individual and your staff who have PPS cover, and if you have your indemnification cover out with PPS, that's absolutely fantastic. What you need to do is just send him an email confirming what he told you. Dear Jaco, as of yesterday or as of today, business has been trading. As you know, we've been trading as essential services since March. I just wanted to confirm that anybody in any of the following categories would be covered as per your statements to me. So just cover yourself by writing to him.
So really what I wanted to just lead up to the question, and that was, what is the waiver that we need patients to sign, and what is the waiver that I need my staff to sign?
So
because I do have staff member over the age of 60. I'm over the age of 60.
All right. So a staff member over the age of 60 is going to have to sign a waiver that if they're back at work, they're back at work on the basis that they acknowledge they will not be covered for workman's compensation. They will not qualify for unemployment. They may not qualify for unemployment insurance funding cover should they get sick or should they be off work. And importantly, from the company's perspective, they will not require the company to have indemnification cover for them contracting or being suspected of contracting COVID while at work. So it's critically important that you have a waiver in that regard, because otherwise they have a claim at you. They can say that I had no symptoms. I was tested, for example, before I came back to work. I was absolutely negative, and within 2 days of coming back to work, I started having symptoms, and suddenly I'm testing positive. And I'm alleging that it's at work or at least on the way to work, because I was recalled to work, that I contracted COVID. And therefore, because I'm not covered by workman's compensation, the company should be covering me in terms of at least my expenses, doctors, medicine, etc., etc. So you please need to understand that they accept they're back at work at their risk. And the only result for them, the only trade that they're benefiting from is a salary. So I cannot overemphasize that point, sir.
So does the same waiver apply for patients? Do patients have to sign a waiver?
Very definitely.
In other words, stating that they cannot hold the practice liable should they contract the virus.
I don't want to sound opportunistic here or blasé, but there was a waiver which was distributed by the Health Professions Council to all practitioners that patients had to sign.
Don't recall.
When a patient comes in, they're supposed to, each of them, be signing that waiver. I could try and get a copy of that waiver, Prof, and email it to you tomorrow so that you can email it out to everybody else. But it's a standard waiver every single patient is going to have to sign.
Thank you. That's critical. Thank you so much. Thanks.
All right, good.
But I think we saw it in the beginning, but I think people thought it was related to level 5 and not levels down.
Please cover yourself, guys, and you know what? Strengthen it, make it a stronger waiver. Most of the what they're signing is to say they'll abide by your standard operating protocols, but they realize that if they're over the age of 60, if they've got a predisposition, they're completely there at their risk and not your risk. You've got to obviate your risk. Although I must warn you that in law, even if they sign a waiver like that, the fact that you let them in the full knowledge that they're over the age of 60 or with a predisposition actually exposes you. And that's why I'm saying to you, it's actually great, Heath, to hear what PPS has told you. You need to reduce that to writing as quickly as possible. You know, I'm not trying to sound sarcastic, but please understand what I'm saying. It is such a gray area. There is nothing specific about it. So if your insurance broker or your insurance company is prepared to go out on a limb and say you're covered, get it in writing, or at least just confirm it in writing to them so they can't come back and say, well, we didn't say that. Please, I'm begging you in that regard. All right, moving on. So, guys, I wanted to just dispel this notion that it's only your employees who earn minimum wage, 3,500 Rand a month, or 6,000, or even 8,000 Rand a month, on whose behalf you can claim temporary employee relief. You're entitled, and I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. You're entitled to claim TER on behalf of every single person who works in your business if they are not at work and they are temporarily laid off. So your business can be open, but you can have 50% of your staff who are temporarily laid off on whose behalf you're claiming TER, temporary employee relief. And you are entitled, even if you haven't applied, you're entitled to go online and apply tomorrow all the way back to the 27th of March. And as long as you apply properly, you will eventually get TERS. It'll take a bit of time, and I can talk from personal experience, it'll take a bit of time. If you have foreigners working for you, even if you've been paying UIF for them, there is a form you have to fill out called UI-19, the UI-19 form. Please make sure you fill that out. You register it on e-filing. Your bookkeeper and accountant should have already have done this for you. And if you haven't got TERS, but you're following up on maybe the reason for you not having TERS, eventually you will collect that money. Please always remember that if you paid something to your employees and it wasn't the encashment of their leave, whatever you paid them must be considered to be an advance on TERS. Because when TERS is paid out, the last thing you're going to do is pay it over to the employee, because you would already have paid them in advance, unless you said to them, I'm paying you nothing, but I will apply for TERS for you. But ordinarily, the employers I've come across have all said, we're paying you in advance, and whatever we get back from TERS, we'll set off against what we've paid you. Please always remember, you cannot go beyond. So whatever you've paid them, plus if you're going to refund them the TERS, whatever you give to them cannot be more than their monthly salary would have been, because otherwise the UIF is going to ask you to pay that money back to them, because the law says they cannot earn more than what they were earning with what you're paying them and with what TERS is actually compensating them. So always bear in mind, and the UIF reserves the right into the future. It's an unlimited right to audit you, to look at what you've paid, to look at what their bank account say has been paid into their bank account. Over the last couple of weeks, the concession has been made, a number of concessions have been made by the minister, and I'm not going to get into my characterization of this minister as essentially a mafioso, but as far as I'm concerned, he is, and his Politburo that works for him are absolutely anti-employer. And the reason I say that is that they've now created an opportunity for the employee to go online, use their ID number to see how much money you've been paid And even if it was for other people, the department are telling them that that money has been paid on their behalf. And so they're consciously creating division between employer and employee. I've had to moderate a number of strikes over the last 2 weeks because of this, caused by the trade unions as well. But one of the changes that have been made is if you're sick and tired of this process, then you say to your employer, I'm not going to pay you anything. You are now, as an employee, entitled to apply for your own TERS. Previously, you weren't, but that's been changed over the last week and a half. So now the employee is entitled to apply for their own TERS. And you're entitled to say, well, you're temporarily laid off. It's no work, no pay, but you can apply for TERS. We'll give you all the paperwork that you need, but you've got to apply for TERS. We're not going to do it on your behalf or any more on your behalf. And you're fully entitled as an employer now to say that. So it very much depends on your relationship with your employees in that particular regard. And I want to burst this bubble that professional staff are not entitled to TERS. A professional person up to the maximum of 17,720 Rand is entitled to, it works out to roughly 6,720 Rand as TERS payment, but not more than that. But it's still something. And so even professional staff are entitled to a TERS repayment. Any question about TERS before I carry on?
Yeah, Ivor, can I ask something?
Yes, please.
So what happened in the business is that the staff were not registered with U-filing. So no UI-19 had been sent in. And so we got back a message that no one was being paid because they weren't registered. So then I sent in the UI-19 forms, and some of the staff were paid, but not all. And now we kind of getting to, that's for April. Now we're in May and you can apply, but I'm wondering if I shouldn't wait until April's been sorted out, or should I submit for May as well?
You should submit for May, but remember, in submitting for May, you have to send proof back to them of the fact that you paid them for April. Even if you didn't get the money for them, that you paid them in advance for April. You'll then get an email from the UIF saying, please fill out the following form. There's only one thing you have to do. You go to a section where you've got 3 things to choose from. You choose the first one, which says advance, I paid in advance, and you simply email that form back to them, and that will activate your claim for the following month. You don't have to do more than that. So you have to send them proof of payment, and you have to send that form back to them, and that will activate your next month's payment.
Okay, so you don't send in the CSV again. You just click on that.
No. Once it's uploaded, it's uploaded.
Okay, and those 3 options, what does the advance mean that you?
The advance means that whatever you paid them, because you're going to have to show you paid them, right? Whatever you paid them in advance of TERS, against which you will set off once you've received the TERS.
Okay. Thanks.
Good.
Ivor, can I ask a question? I might have missed this now.
Sure, of course.
So if you bring some of your staff back and
Yeah.
you're working on, say, 50% of your load,
Yeah.
do you still claim TERS for that person?
No, you don't claim TERS for the guy you bring back. You claim TERS for the guys who stayed at home. So if you're a company that employs more than 10 people, by law, when you open up again, you can only bring 33% back the first week or month, and the period is up to you. And then you put in place your standard operating protocol, you test it on that first 33%, and then you bring the next 33% back, let's say a week or 2 weeks or a month later. For the period that they're still at home until you recall them, so the week or the 2 weeks or the month, for that period, you're still entitled to claim TERS.
Sorry, can you just repeat that? My sound broke up.
Okay.
I've
So
missed
if you employ more than 10 people, in fact, if you employ more than 6 people, you are supposed to bring your staff back at 33% at a time. And the reason you're
Okay.
supposed to bring them back at 33% at a time is you have to put in place your standard operating protocol, put up posters, mark out the floors, etc., the work areas, etc., for social distancing, and then test it out on the first third of your staff, and then decide, right, it's working. Now we can bring the next third back, test it out on the next third, and see if it's working, and then the final third. And the gaps between the first third, the second, and the third can be as long as you want. It can be a week, it can be 2 weeks, it can be a month. It's absolutely up to you to determine. Remembering that tours will last until the end of June at this stage. If lockdown is extended, in other words, if we're still in stage 3 in July, it's likely that tours will be extended for another 3 months. But as things stand at the moment, you can take as long as you want between the first third and the second third and the third third. And while the second third and the third third are at home waiting to be recalled, they are temporarily laid off, they will qualify for tours.
Okay, and if you have 4 staff, can you bring all of them back?
You bring all 4 staff. If you've got 4 staff, you bring all 4 staff back.
If you have more than 6.
If you've got someone over the age of 60, or if you've got someone who's predisposed, then you don't bring them back. Or if you do, you bring them back in a very guarded way.
Okay, thank you.
All right, sir.
I have another question, if I may.
Sure. And then Harold.
Can you just clarify again? Can you clarify again the situation in terms of if an application was sent in for tours for April, and we've been paid for April, and we have remitted proof of payment to the members of staff for April, do we not need to make a subsequent application again?
No.
For May?
You see, the proof of payment, submitting to them the proof of payment for April activates the next payment. If you look at the original government gazette that came out, it told you what was required to activate the second and the third payment.
So it's the proof of payment that activates the second payment.
Absolutely. Now, if they've sent you back a form to say, please fill in the following form, then that's part of the activation process.
Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Hi,
yes.
Ivan.
Yes.
Sorry. Just a question around whether people. So you mentioned that if a third of your staff come back, the 2/3 basically would be on no time or short time or whatever, and you could still claim tours for them. But what if your business, let's say our practices are running at 50% revenue, can we short pay staff and still claim tours even though they're full-time?
Right. So Sam, this is how it works. If Sam Noodleman is back at work, but he's only working 50% of his normal hours, or he's working 100% of his normal hours, but I'm only paying him at 50% rate, then Sam Noodleman is entitled to UIF, but it's not TERS. So TERS is immediately shut down for Sam Noodleman if Sam Noodleman is back at work, even if it's only on 20% of his hours. But he does qualify for short pay. He does qualify for short time, for reduced hours, which is a separate UIF insurance policy. So you would claim from UIF on the same sliding scale, 60% to 38%, but it would be not as TERS, but as a normal UIF cover for reduced hours. So there are a number of different insurance policies within the UIF system. TERS is only one of them. It's the most recent policy that they've created. But there are other policies, and he would claim under the other policy that's been ongoing for years and years and years, and that's the one to do with reduced hours. The difference being that whereas the company would apply for Sam Noodleman as one of his members of staff, for TERS, Sam Noodleman himself has to apply for himself if it's any of the other UIF policies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Just a question.
Yes, of course. Yes, Rian.
So you stated that the minute you show proof of payment, it activates the next month's payment.
Well, there's a number of
For TERS.
requirements. There's a number of requirements, but basically, once you've submitted proof of payment to them of April's against the TERS payment you received for April, and they're satisfied, then it'll automatically activate. But 9 times out of 10, they'll write to you about another problem, and you've always got to keep going online, because going online, there'll be a red button and a green button. The green button is where there's no problem and you just keep going forward. But the red button would indicate to you if there's a problem with one of the people on whose behalf you've already received payment, but the UIF are questioning one or other of the things which you have to rectify and remedy.
Okay, but the question now comes that you've now proved proof of payment and they're activating, let's say, all your ducks in a row, but now you go back to work. You're not allowed to claim TERS anymore. How do you then cancel?
You go online. You go online and you ask them on behalf of that individual to please cancel the TERS application for that particular individual, and for the following reason: we've now taken this guy back to work. So now here's the thing. If you don't bring it to the UIF's attention that Sam Noodleman is now back at work, and so that it automatically then pays you out for Sam Noodleman at the end of May, in likelihood middle of June for the end of May, but it automatically does that. The obligation is on you then to say to the UIF, sorry, you've incorrectly paid me out, or rather, I didn't bring to your attention that Sam's no longer on temporary layoff, and therefore I have to pay you that amount back. And that's just as a process of paying them back. It's not, you're not a criminal for doing it, but you have to regularize it. Because remember, they're starting to appoint auditors out there who at some stage will catch up with you and say, let's go over Sam's history and trajectory. SARS tells us that you were paying PAYE on behalf of Sam Noodleman during the period that you were collecting TERS from us. So what's going on here? Were you using TERS to subsidize his salary when in fact he was already back at work? So you just got to be very careful about that. So it's your job to bring it to SARS attention rather than waiting for them to bring it to your attention.
So you're not supposed to pay UIF over during this period if you're claiming TERS.
Yeah.
If I understand you correctly.
Yes, absolutely. Because the guy's temporarily laid off, so you're not paying UIF.
Yeah, because last month we paid UIF like we always do, like our soldiers, and we claimed for TERS. So that was wrong.
Yeah, just leave it. That's one thing that you'll leave, because it'll just cause a complication.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
The fact that their system accepted your UIF is the first problem. But like I say, just leave it until someone brings it to your attention and then just rectify it at that stage. Okay, guys, I'm going to move off UIF and TR for the and just to move a little forward. Okay, so I've already said to you,
Arvin,
yes.
Sorry, can I just this point, I'll just before you leave it, it's just not 100% clear to me. If we back on 50% or 60% time, in other words, we're paying our staff for the days that they come in only. Are you saying that there's no PAYE or UIF on those payments?
No, I'm not saying that. No, absolutely not. I'm saying the moment your staff member is back at work, that for the period that they've worked, of course there's PAYE, and yes, if they're back at work, then there's absolute UIF that you're paying.
Okay.
I'm saying, Heath, that if they are in TER, in other words, if they are in temporary layoff, you've temporarily laid them off from work. They are no longer your employees. During that layoff period, you don't pay UIF.
Got it. Okay. But when they're back at work for the period that they're working on half
10% of the time, even if it's 10% of the time, you have to pay all normal statutory monies.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. No, and I'm very glad you asked the question. Thanks. Okay. So, guys, I just want to very quickly go back to a previous point, and then I will end. I did promise that this wouldn't be more than 45 minutes. I do apologize. But the point I'm wanting to make to you is this. In terms of performance management, I'm going to say it again. A staff member who is not performing for competency reasons, you are entitled to go straight to discipline. You do not have to go through a counseling period. If you have exhausted your obligation, and that means if you've trained him and taught him, and if he's done his job properly in the past, you do not have to counsel him to correct his way he's doing his job, his competency level. If he hasn't got up to a competency level, you cannot discipline him until you've got him to the stage of being absolutely competent. And then it's up to him to remain competent. Critically important that you understand when you can discipline, when you have to counsel. Counseling on competency is to get to the stage where you've exhausted your obligation to make him perform. Once you've got to that stage and he stops performing, you can go straight to discipline and you can dismiss if necessary. There is this notion in this country that we have a step ladder approach to discipline, which means we have to give him a first warning and then a second warning and then a third warning, and only on the fourth warning can we fire him. That's absolute nonsense. We do not have legislation in this country or labor court precedent that says we have a step ladder approach to discipline. If it's a competency problem or a behavioral problem, and it's significant enough, even if it's the first time it's happened, you are entitled to have a disciplinary inquiry and to dismiss him. So from a labor relations point of view, COVID has got nothing to do with how you apply your performance management system in your business. And yet there seems to be so much misunderstanding amongst employers who seem to feel that you cannot apply your normal performance management process to your employees because of COVID. If they're back at work and they do something wrong in terms of competency, they take out the wrong tooth, or they kill the person while giving them a local anesthetic. Bottom line is, you can discipline and you can dismiss straight away, even if it's the first time they've killed someone. You do not have to give them a first, second, third, and fourth final warning before you discipline them and dismiss them. Critically important you understand that. The test is, have you exhausted your obligation to train, and have you handed over to them the obligation to continue to perform? A behavioral issue, you never counsel on behavior. You're not your employee's parent. And COVID's got nothing, again, to do with it. If your employee is coming late to work and you're sick and tired of them coming late to work and you've got enough evidence, you can have an inquiry and you can dismiss. If your employee is insubordinate, doesn't follow your instruction, or is insubordinate to you in front of a customer or a client or a patient, you can have an inquiry and you can dismiss, even if it's the first time it's happened. You just have to be procedurally correct. And I cannot emphasize enough how many mistakes employers are making by bending over backwards and in the process setting the wrong kind of precedent in your business. And if it goes to the labor court, the wrong kind of precedent in the dental business, because a lawyer will say, well, this is what happened in Professor Peart's business, and you should apply it in our business, in Alan Deutsch's business. So all I'm saying to you guys is please be aware of how to apply your performance management system with all of your staff, not just your blue-collar staff, not just your cleaner, but as much as your professional dentist is working for you. They are as subject to your normal performance management system in your business as anybody else would be subject to in your business. Please do not let the reins go in that regard. I'm begging you. Any question about performance management? I know that we haven't dealt in depth with the 3 stages. The 3 stages are: number 1, how you manage the job description, entitlement, expectation, key performance indicators, how you measure them against those. When you go to counseling, when you go to discipline, when you dismiss, or when you give a final written warning, and how you give a final written warning. And maybe what we want to do is run a follow-up workshop specifically on performance management of your staff for another time, because I think it could be quite useful as an ongoing way of just making sure that we inculcate the right culture of performance management in the dental sector. I know I've covered it I haven't really covered it. So is there anything you want to ask about performance management in this very brief description of how the performance management system works? I don't want to muddy the waters. Our principal discussion seems to have been around UIF and TER and the level 3 and hotspots. And I don't want to go into performance management unless you want to go into performance management. It's been short, it's sharp and succinct, but the one message I do want to leave you with, please, is this. Once an essential service is trading, even if you're only trading for 25% of your normal trading hours, the cover of COVID disappears. So the cover of COVID to interrupt the performance management process disappears the moment the employee is back at work. He is no longer temporarily laid off. And if he's not temporarily laid off, he is subject to all the performance management requirements in your business that he ordinarily would be subject to. And the same goes for Section 189 processes, which may result in retrenchment. Exactly the same. Any questions?
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yes, sure, Harold.
Harold, you go first.
All right, so Harold first and then Simon. Harold first and then Simon. Yes, Harold.
Okay. Either the question of, oh, shucks, it's just left my mind again now.
All right.
Can I come after?
Of course you can. Simon and then Stash. Yes, Simon.
I wanted to ask a question regarding what would happen if one of our staff members tested positive and we had to close our practice down for 14 days. Do we go back to the TERS fund because now all of our staff are unemployed for 2 weeks? In that type of situation, what would we do?
No, I don't know if you saw the Minister of Labour and his speech on the weekend. So understand this. The reason that they've gone to level 3 is essentially to force companies to take on the responsibility and to reduce the onus on the Department of Labour through UIF and TERS to have to cover that responsibility. So, Simon, this is critically important what I'm going to say now. The moment you've opened your doors, even as an essential service, you've assumed liability and responsibility for sick leave. You've assumed liability and responsibility for your business in such a way that you cannot go back to TERS. Okay. So if a staff member is tested positive, you are obliged to give them a minimum of 14 days sick leave and pay them for those 14 days sick leave, except that the Minister of Labour has said, he hasn't done this in the Gazette, but he said this verbally. He said a normal sick leave cycle is 36 days in a 3-year cycle. He said verbally that your 36 days should start running from the 27th of March, irrespective of where you were in your cycle, which means that a staff member is entitled to 36 days paid sick leave should they get sick from TERS.
What happens if you haven't been employing them for 6 months yet? Does it matter? Can they take 30 days and they haven't been working in your practice for 6 months?
They are entitled to 36 days in advance over a 3-year cycle period. Now, let me say this to you. He said that verbally, it hasn't been reduced to a Gazette. Okay. So as far as the Gazette is concerned, wherever they are in their 36-day cycle is how you would currently. So if they've taken 30 days in a 3-year period and they're in the 3rd year of their 3-year period, they would only be able to take another 6 days. Unless the Department of Labour wrote to you and said, hold on a moment, the 36-day cycle started on the 27th of March. In which case you would say, but hold on a moment, that hasn't yet been gazetted, so you can't apply it. And you'd be right in saying that. You just need to be aware of your rights, though. So in answer to your question, if, number one, if a staff member gets coronavirus sick, they're entitled to a minimum of 14 days paid sick leave, but as much as 36 days in a 3-year cycle. Other staff members equally. If you've got to shut your entire business down, none of the staff who would have been back at work can go back to TERS. But what you can do is you can say everybody's healthy and wealthy, everybody's fine, but we're not doing a turnover we want to do. We're going back into lockdown. You can do that as long as no one's sick.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, because I mean,
Yes, sorry.
Sorry. So the person who is sick would qualify for the 14 days paid sick leave.
Yes.
But everybody else forced to shut down for that 2-week period as well, they wouldn't be paid out sick leave, obviously.
Well, they'd go into quarantine. Now, remember, going into quarantine means that they would be entitled to normal leave. However, if a doctor has put them into quarantine, then you're obligated to pay them out sick leave.
Okay.
You follow what I'm saying? So if they come back with a
Yes.
doctor's note to say that they've been diagnosed as needing to go into quarantine, so they need to have had a test. So if they've been diagnosed as positive, but not just if it's precautionary quarantine.
Okay.
Right, Stash, and then yes, sir.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for a fantastic webinar. Just a question, and also just to share with the group, what we've decided to do with our sterilization clerk is to utilize her on the days that we have hygiene services as well. So that's, let's say, 2 or 3 days a week, and then not to employ her on the alternate or the remainder of the 2 days or 3 days of the week, because we are on slow dentistry. In other words,
so you've reduced her hours. You've reduced her hours.
Yeah, so we pay her for that. Is that correct? And then we claim for normal UIF for the balance.
Yes, she claims for normal UIF. So you give her a piece of paper that says we've reduced your hours by 50%. She goes to UIF. You give her her UIF number. She goes to UIF. She claims for the balance, the 50% balance, but on the 60 to 38% sliding scale.
Right. Thank you very much.
Right, Harold?
Okay, you have just answered my question. It was just about for the short-time staff member, they individually have to claim for themselves. It's not the employer that claims.
It's not the company. They have to claim for themselves.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you very much. Prof, I hope I've added some kind of value to your study group. I know we went over the time I promised. I do apologize for that, sir.
No problem. That was excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Will we get a recording to listen to this again, Ivor?
Of course you will. Absolutely you will, sir.